Okay, let's go.
Welcome, everybody. Today on Spooky Mysteries, I am your host, as always, Joe Rios. I was a little weird this time. But, anyways, we are going to be talking about one of the biggest, baddest kukui to ever roam this planet. This one took me a long time. This one took me a lot longer to write the script for than any other of them. And I haven't even printed it out, so I don't even have a physical copy of this one. Because every time I finish a script, I get a physical copy and I post it. Or not post. I don't post it, but I have it in my binder of stories. Because eventually, I want to turn it into an actual like anthology of all the kukuis that we talk about. So I'm even going through all my old transcripts and writing everything down and getting all that. But beyond the story, anyways, beyond all that, we're going to be talking, like I said, about one of the biggest baddies to ever walk the planet, or roam the planet, should I say. And this week's episode is going to go over something or someone that I've talked about before. I have talked about the story before, and I actually had a co-host talk with me about this. Shining Nathan, like a year and a half ago, was on an episode with me. And this past week, with his permission, I posted the story again. His clip cut out, and I turned it into like a little series that aired on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere. So you could see it piece by piece as the whole story came out all week. I think on some of my socials it's still coming out, but by the time y'all get this episode, it should already be ready to go. And I'm talking about none other than La Llorona. We have all heard the story growing up. Depending on where you're from and where your parents are from will determine what story you were told. That is true because we've all heard the story of La Llorona from the beginning to end. But through my research, I have discovered so much more. And it's a lot. So let's continue on. Hold on. Let's continue. The stories even cross the border and have taken hold, also being told as the woman in white, the woman in black, or the weeping woman. Now, I didn't get too far into this. I could have, and I still can. I can add this to the very end. But we'll get to that point when we get to that point. So, as the weeping woman, right? So tonight we're going to cover as many stories that I can find, and I found a lot. Starting with believed facts and moving on from there to stories across Latin America. La Llorona, the most common story is that she murdered her children for the love of a man that did not share the same sentiment, forever mourning the loss of her children. Now, recently I saw this come across one of my TikTok and Instagram, is the supposed tomb of La Llorona. It is said to be located in Dolores Hidalgo in Guanajuato, at kilometer marker 21 of the Dolores Hidalgo San Luis Paz Highway. Is what appears to be a tomb or a monument of some kind. It is believed to be the actual tomb of La Llorona, with a plaque dating back to September 1923. Local people say they have heard the cries of La Llorona way before that, since the 1850s. Residents say they have spotted her soul late at night, and when her family and friends of the sightings, I didn't even write. I wrote this, but I don't know what I was thinking. In my mind, this came out better. And when her family and friends of the sightings, those people disappeared. Okay, so let me try this again. Residents say they have spotted her soul late at night, and those that have spotted her, their friends and family have disappeared or died because it is seen as an omen. That's what I was trying to say there. Because of this, they blamed the ghost on those missing. The residents of the town believed this was due to there not being a proper plaque on the grave. So they added one, and all the events stopped. They eventually added the monument, which is what leads people to believe that this is the tomb of La Llorona. The only events to continue were the disembodied cries, and it wasn't until missionaries arrived to bless this location that everything truly stopped. So that's a location about one version of La Llorona, which version it is unknown due to there being so many retellings of the story. So we don't know which version this is. This could be the original. This could be, one of those friend of a friend stories. something that gets passed along due to local legends. We'll never know. One of the oldest origins dates back to the time of Montezuma II. Now that's way back in time, right? A Spanish evangelist wrote down the Aztec emperor was worried about dreams that he was having, where a woman in white was announcing the end of his reign. The reason she often depicted as being near a river or a body of water was because she first appeared in Lake Texcoco, which is located in the capital of the legendary Aztec Empire. Another version from about 1521 and 1821, that's a time frame, tells of a woman who people called La Mala Madre, which translates means the bad mother. She was an indigenous woman known as a Malinche, which means traitor. Why was she called a traitor? It was because she was the lover of Hernan Cortes, the conquistador. Upon returning to Spain, he took her child away and she did nothing to stop him. The Aztec people saw this as the ultimate betrayal for not stopping him. She represented motherhood, a gloomy, dark motherhood, symbolizing a mistreatment and degrading parenting after giving her son away willingly. Those are a few of the oldest stories I could find. And there's more. There's a lot more older stories out there. Another one is of a earthly deity of a mother of motherhood and fertility known as Sihuacotel, which states that she seduces men when they are out alone in the roads or working in the fields. She will give herself to these men and destroy them. Now, it's not all bad as it seems. She has also been known to be helpful by blessing them with fortunes or a bountiful crop. So far, that's three different versions already, right? And I'm going to circle back around to the deities. There's still a lot more to explore. La Llorona has appeared in poetry, stories, and movies, with the most recent movie being La Llorona in the Conjuring universe, even though it's technically not affiliated with it, but we all know it is, right? There's been many movies about her. There's even Mama, which is I see it as a loose translation of La Llorona because it is about a tormented spirit who lost her children and she finds two kids in the woods and she takes care of them. She becomes their mama. And it's the same story. Goes along the same way because in this story, in that movie, she's thrown off a cliff. The baby too, dies. So yeah. It's in all sorts of media, from stories, poems to, like I said, movies. And you just gotta you don't have to find a connection, but a lot of movies the connection is there. Like I said, there's Mama, there's La Llorona, there's The Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe. That one it runs along the same thought and the same line process of a tormented spirit who attacks children, and because of whatever reason, and a loss of a child is usually what starts it. That's also why I put that on there at the beginning, the Weeping Woman in White, the Lady in Black, all those different kinds of stories. But before we continue with more of the stories of La Llorona, this is a poem from 1849 written by Manuel Carpio, where she got her official name from. Now, this is where we see the name in literature for the first time, supposedly. And from my research, this is the only one of very few times where that's what is she known as. That is what she is known as. That is what she is referred to. I will say it the way it was originally written and then the translated version. Now, y'all know me, my Spanish, for some reason, when I read it, is not the greatest. Pálido de terror contra huí cuando era niño yo, niño inocente, que dio la muerte un hombre en mi pueblo a su esposa Rosalia. Y desde entonces en la noche umbría oye temblando de mujer doliente, cuidados como daba en su agonía, por algún rato en su lamento cesa, mas luego se desata en largo llanto, y sola por las calles atraviesa. A todos llena de mortal espanto, y junto al río en la tinibla espesa se va llorando, envuelta con su manto. Like I said, for some reason when I read Spanish, this is the translated version of it. But then she breaks out in a prolonged weeping, and alone she traverses the streets. She fills everyone with mortal terror, and close by the river in the thick darkness she goes, weeping, wrapped in her cloak. Now that's that's a crazy story, right? That's one of the first times she's ever mentioned. Well, by name, by what we know her name to be. Another story comes from a book written by Francis Torr in 1947. And I downloaded this book. If you can find it, you can download it. The website where I got it from is currently down. It's been down for about a week now. So I have it on file, and that's where I'm going to get some of my stories from now, because it is like a complete, it is also an anthology of Mexican culture, which states the story is more closely related to that of the woman in white or the weeping woman from Europe. Like I said, it's the woman in white or the weeping woman in white, and those are European stories. Those are Americanized, Europeanized, colonialized, whatever you want to call it. That's those types of stories. This story is different because she does not drown her children, like the most common of stories states, but instead she murders her children by stabbing them to death. In this version, she is put to death, and at the same time, her love interest also either dies at the same time or is buried at the same time, which adds to the anguish to her spirit. Okay, so here it goes. It happened in Mexico City. Luisa was a beautiful maiden who fell in love with a man from high society. They did not get married due to the class difference. He followed the custom intended for those that was going to get married. He furnished a house for her, had 3 kids, and lived happily ever after. Then one day his family came to visit and told him about the wonderful news they had for him. They had found him a wife, fitting of his class in society. Due to the way most Hispanics are raised, he listened to his parents and agreed to marry the girl they had found for him. On the day of his wedding, she decided to crash it as an uninvited guest. She professes her love for him. Sadly, that was not the case. He did not profess it back. He didn't reciprocate it. Distraught, angry, furious, basically she was unhinged at this point, she went home and plunged a dagger into each of her children that they both loved. The realization of what she had done sank in. She ran through the streets, screaming and crying for her children, calling for them and wanting them to return to her. It does not say if she was taken to jail, tried, or anything, but she was garroted, so that means she was tried at some point, which is being strangled by an iron collar or a wire. I'm going to say that with what happened to her lover, Don Nuno Montes, that some time had passed as he was buried the same day. He had committed suicide. Since then, she appears roaming the streets of Mexico City, crying in pain for her children and taking revenge on all men. At times, she appears as a young, attractive maiden. When a man speaks to her or she speaks to him, he passes out till the next day at noon. So if you see her, you're done for. At least you're going to be unconscious for a few hours till 12 o'clock the next day. If she has her face covered with a veil, like a wedding veil, whoever sees her face behind the veil will fall over dead from fright. Because it's supposed to be, when she takes off her veil, it's a faceless, skeletal-like figure. Even then, this version is a retelling from a story that was published in 1888 that was widely circulated. It even made its way to Kansas in the Wichita Eagle newspaper. And if you could find it, you can actually type that in and you could probably find it. That just goes to show that this story has traveled the US and all over Europe and Latin America. The stories from Europe are believed to have been taken from the myth of Medea, which is the sorceress that helps Jason retrieve the Golden Fleece and later kills their children and his new bride. The other one comes from Madama Butterfly, which is a 3-part opera that tells the tragic story of Chow Chow, a young Japanese girl that falls in love with an American naval officer, with devastating results. So the version that we all are used to hearing are basically European versions due to the narrative that they were told in each one and the ladies in white stories. The Mexican versions are usually of a woman, a demon sorceress that takes revenge on men or gives them riches. There is a debate over where La Llorona came from. There is no direct link to any European folklore matching her description. To justify saying that it is a European connection, So there's no real connection. There's just similarities that we find in all these tellings of the stories. Hold on one second. Matching her description to justify saying that it is a European connection. Where did the name come from? It may have been a reference to professional mourners from Spain. So in Spain, one of the traditions is that you can hire, or there will be professional mourners that go with you as you're being taken to your final resting place. It is also translated in Spanish as crybaby. At some point, it makes sense that it would be, I thought I had the name of it, put to a wailing spirit. Did La Llorona come from across the ocean to Mexico, or was it associated to the indigenous legends that already ruled the land? And one of the earliest links of La Llorona would be in a story that was written in 1866 that specifically calls its main character La Llorona. So there's two different stories that say that it is the first time. And that's how I wrote it, because, like I said, this is one of the first true times that she has referenced that. And now there's another one where she's referenced as La Llorona, where that is actually her. So in one, she's referenced as La Llorona, and in this one, she is La Llorona. This is the summary of that in his reign. This is the summary of that. In his reign, King Pedro the Cruel kept an eye on villages like Rota to see if they were governed well. In those days, there was already a formidable castle there. The Castilian in charge of it was a haughty, bloodthirsty, arrogant young man who did not recognize or respect any divine or human law, and who overran anyone who opposed his criminal desires. At the time, there was also a fisherman who was a widower and lived alone with his young and beautiful daughter, Elvira. Elvira helped her father with the fishing and mending nets, but she also enjoyed festival days when she would go to the plaza and dance. She was so beautiful that she outshone all the other young women, and so she became prideful. When the mutilated bodies of several village children were found, the Castilian was suspected of the crimes, and Elvira's father warned her to keep clear of him. But she decided that if she made the Castilian fall in love with her, she would be elevated above her peers. One day, the fisherman saved the Castilian's life, and this led to a meeting between the Castilian and Elvira. A week later, there were rumors of a courtship, and a week after that, Elvira disappeared. What could have happened? Her father searched everywhere, eventually realizing she must have gone to the castle. So he went there himself and begged the Castilian to let his daughter go. From a high window, Elvira told her father she was now the lady of the castle, and sarcastically added that she had traded his poor shack for a rich palace. The father ran away in despair, crying that his daughter was the lady of the castle, and the people believed he was mad. The next morning, the townspeople awoke to find a gallows raised in front of the castle and the Castilian hanging from it. People believed that King Pedro had discovered the Castilian's crimes and had him hanged. Elvira became the subject of public ridicule and could not bear it. In despair, she threw herself in a well and drowned. From that day on, every night at 12 o'clock, she rose from the well, wandered through the streets, and entered the castle, crying and moaning all the while. And people said that the punishment that heaven had imposed on Elvira here on earth for her pride was to mourn the death of the Castilian, leaving the well of La Llorona, every night. Even though this version was written in the 1800s, the original tale comes from somewhere else around the 1350s, 1369, during the reign of Pedro I. This is the earliest tale, even predating the earliest of what is known as the White Ladies. So, again, this is like at the end of every story, from all my research, this is what it states. Is like this is the earliest. So there is no definitive, this is it. This is the beginning. And it's just something that's been going on since the beginning of tales, I guess. This story has elements that we are all familiar with, such as water. Instead of rivers and lakes, it's in the form of wells and oceans. Then there's the infanticide, which is the main element of the story. It's not the weeping woman that commits the crimes. In other areas, there are stories of what is known as the wicked woman or wicked women, which is just a description for La Llorona. In the Yucatan, she is known as, I'm going to butcher this, Xtabai, Xtabai, a demon of the woods. She will appear to men as a beautiful young woman dressed in the finest wear of the time, with long, luxurious hair, to lure any man into the bush. This is where she reveals her true form, and if he cannot get away, she will then choke him to death. She can also change into a tree, which is why riders must be cautious when riding near trees, or they can be taken off by the shitabi, or the horse could just be scared and throw the rider. So you know how like in Pocahontas, the Weeping Willow, that's a version of La Llorona. The Weeping Willow. There's another connection I would have never thought of if I didn't think about that right now. But how when they're walking by, it kind of gets them, the two soldiers, and it's like she whips one of them with the vines. That could happen when you're riding. You go through it fast enough, it could wrap around you and knock you off and pull you off, and it'll choke you, which is where some of these beliefs come from. She can also take the form of a banded snake, green and yellow, with markings on its back. In this form, she will plug your nose with her tail. Yeah, she'll plug your nose up with her tail, and it'll plug. Yeah. You cannot kill the snake because then it'll just come back to hurt you more and cannot. I wrote it down and then I wrote it again because this is exactly how I wrote it. You cannot kill the snake because then it'll just come back to hurt you more and cannot be killed. So I reiterated that you cannot kill it twice. When I get into the mood of writing, as I'm thinking, I just type, and this is how it comes out. In Chiapas, Mexico, it's more of a friend of a friend story. One of those, it happened to a friend of a friend. That's where we get the FOF stories, friend of a friend's. The fireplace, campfire stories. And this is a story that men from Chiapas use to get home, to get out of work early so they can go home. It's said that at night you will hear a familiar voice calling out to you in the wilderness, trying to lure you away. If you follow the voice, it will lead to your doom. Most men are usually saved just in the nick of time by the person of the familiar voice. By the person the familiar voice belongs to. And they'll usually be found battered and bruised. So it's a spirit, a disembodied voice. Not spirit. It's a redundancy. It's a disembodied voice that sounds like a loved one. Most often than not, a woman. So like your wife, your daughter, your girlfriend, whatever, your mother. It's usually a womanly figure. That's who the voice belongs to. And like I said, it's usually saved. They usually get saved like right before they're about to die. And it's usually by the person the voice belongs to. So like, like their mom went searching for them. Their girlfriend went to look for them. Whatever, right? That's who finds them right before they're about to die. So it's basically like an omen, like a countdown. You hear a voice that sounds like, let's see, me, for example, if I were to hear my wife out there calling me outside, I would basically have until I get to the source of the voice before I died. And my wife would have to find me right before I get there. Some of the oldest origins date back to pre-conquest days. So in other words, pre-conquistador days in Mexico, where she is represented by the goddess. I'm going to butcher this so much. Remember I said I'd circle back around to the deities. We're circling back around to the deities. She is represented by the goddess Cihuapilitin. I'm butchering that. It's Cihuapipiltin. The goddess of those. She is the goddess of those mothers that have died when their first child was born, returning to Earth to take revenge on children and adults alike. Or she can also be found in Aztec mythology as the goddess Cihuacoatl, where she is considered a bad omen, dressed in a night dress that is white with a cradle in her arms, crying uncontrollably for her lost child. Her story is a simple one. It states that she would appear with a cradle over her shoulder, as if with a child, and walk into the market and cry for her lost child, leaving behind the cradle. When people found it, they would see inside the cradle was just a flint or iron piece similar to the ones used to do sacrifices. That would be the telltale sign that she was there. She is also considered one of the most important goddesses in Aztec mythology. So there's a lot to cover. And in a minute, I'm going to clip in also Shining Nathan's story. So, which I can do right now, actually. So I'm going to cue that up. And I'm actually going to cut this. Let's see if it lets me cue it up, because it's the software I use to adjust my clips doesn't like me having other stuff open at the same time. And I also got food on the way too. Well, he's 1 minute away. I probably got to go outside. He's right around the corner. Okay. So while I'm going to go do that, I got stuff in my content library. I do not. Okay, I'll add it. It'll be a minute. I'll be right back, guys. Sorry about that. I had to go grab some stuff real quick. So now let me just grab this, edit my files real quick, because I had one already set up, but I didn't realize that when I made it, the edits that I used got all screwed up. So as I fixed it, it was like, okay, this goes here, this goes here. And then I wanted to be like, oh, let's be fancy and add transitions. But those transitions overlapped. And I was like, well, that sucked. So I got to make another one really fast. So this one, part 4, part 2, it didn't come out in order. I didn't. What? Part 1. Okay, so part 1 right here. Part 2 right here. 3, 4. Now the lucky part is that I already made this and it's already premiering all over social media, my social medias. All I gotta do is put it together, export, highest quality it'll let me. La Llorona. And I'll call this one fixed because I fucked up the other one. There you go. So while we wait for that to load, let's continue. Yeah. She is considered one of the most important goddesses in Aztec mythology. Even here in Texas, we have a woman in white story. And she is the woman in white of Coppell? No, not Coppell. Round Rock, Texas. The lady in white of Round Rock, Texas. Now, this is a story I heard a long time ago. So, there's 3 versions. There's the Lady of the Lake, the White Lady of Rio Frio, and an apparition in La Plaza. Yeah, that didn't look good, right? So, let's start off with the Lady of the Lake. Now, this is the Lady of the Lake of Round Rock, Texas. A woman named Anne Clark wrote the account of the Lady of the Lake legend published in 1943, The Ghost of Round Rock. So, this is how it goes. So, I got hair all over my face. So, the story had already been growing since then, right? I hate when I get random hair on my face. And this is, by the time this story gets reported to the news, it had been 3 different other people who have reported this. So, The Ghost of White Rock, Texas was included in the Texas Folklore Society's publication, Backwoods to Borders. So here it goes. A young couple parked on the shore of White Rock Lake. When they switched their headlights on, they saw a woman in white coming towards them. A young girl dressed in a sheer, wet white dress. She spoke in a faltering voice. I'm sorry to intrude, and I would not under any other circumstances, but I must find a way home immediately. My boat overturned, the others are safe, but I must get home. She climbed into the rumble seat, saying that she did not wish to get the young lady wet. She gave them an address in Oak Cliff, Texas. When they asked her for directions, they turned around only to find the rumble seat empty and wet. The couple went to the address she gave them. A sad man met them at the door. The man told them, "This is a very strange thing. You are a 3rd couple who has come to me with this story. 3 weeks ago, while sailing on White Rock Lake, my daughter drowned." Yeah. So that's one of the oldest stories from Texas, at least. There's different versions of it, and I'll read one more version of it. This is from Frank X. Tolbert's book in the Neiman Marcus catalog. He's a Dallas author. In this account, a beautiful blonde girl appears on the road near White Rock Lake. Mr. and Mrs. Guy Malloy, directors of display for Neiman Marcus, spot her standing as if she had just walked up from the beach. Upon seeing the girl standing in the beams of their headlights, Miss Malloy said, "Stop, Guy. That girl seems in trouble." She must have fallen in the lake. Her dress is wet. You can tell that it is a very fine dress. She certainly got it at the store. Meaning, of course, Neiman Marcus, their store. The friendly girl asked them to take her to an address on Avenue and nearby in Lakewood. She didn't offer an explanation for her stay, and the Malloys were too polite to ask. Her long hair began to dry in the night breeze. Miss Malloy was now sure the girl's dress was from Neiman Marcus. The girl got in the back seat of the two-door sedan. When the car started, Miss Malloy turned to discover the girl had vanished. The only trace of her was the damp spot on the back seat. Puzzled, the Malloys went to the address she provided. A middle-aged man met them at the door. He informed them that his blonde daughter, who wore nothing but Neiman Marcus clothes, drowned 2 years before when she fell off a pier at White Rock Lake. And now they're both stories from White Rock Lake. But the second one, it seems like a cash grab because Neiman Marcus is mentioned like 3 or 4 different times, right? But yeah, so the similarities between this and La Llorona is that it's a woman in white who's in trouble in a faltered state, and there's water. Now that's what I'm saying. Like you can find similarities across all borders. This is why it's a similar thing to the woman in white. Here's another one: the White Lady of Rio Frio. The sadness and tragic ending to Maria's life caused her soul to remain restless. Her spirit wanders around the Rio Frio Valley, still wearing her sister's white wedding dress. Maria was a caring and nurturing soul while she was alive, and remained so in the afterlife. The White Lady of Rio Frio is known to look after scared or lost children, and has been said to guide them back home. Many children around the Rio Frio Valley have woken up to Maria standing over them from bed or sitting in their room, watching and guarding them. She also cloaks children who are cold or scared, comforting them and protecting them from harm. All Maria wanted in life was to have a family, and since her dream was never realized, she lives out her fantasies by caring for the children of those in her hometown. Many have seen Maria while on the banks of the Rio Frio. The cool temperatures of the valley often bring a hazy fog to the river. They say that her apparition appears within the fog on a cool night. She hovers over the water and moves with the fog, with her long white dress trailing gracefully behind her. Those who see her apparition on the river usually feel a sense of calmness overcome them as they hear her comforting voice whispering in their ear. The river bank was her meeting spot with Anselmo, so it's probable that her spirit would appear there as she patiently waits for her lover to return. Yeah, that's crazy, right? There's more to it. I'm gonna read more to it, but that's insane because there's a lot to that, and there's a lot of similarities again to La Llorona, and it is a someone who's passed away near water, and there's children involved. This time, instead of harming children, she protects the children. Others have had experiences where they were saved from falling into the river, believed to have been saved by Maria. While the Rio Frio is quite shallow in many places, it gets pretty deep. A few townsfolk have claimed that Maria has saved them from drowning or falling onto jagged rocks by guiding them across the river or catching them before they fall. One man says that he felt a hand grab his t-shirt when he almost slipped on the moss-covered rock and was pulled back to safety by the invisible hand. He previously paid no mind to the legend of the White Lady, but has since become a believer. While some doubt that Maria's spirit still wanders the canyon, others swear by it. Those that do believe, though, all say the same thing. The White Lady of Rio Frio is the kindest spirit you'll ever meet. Now that is a story. Now there's one more, which is the apparition at the plaza. Now, so this is El Paso's Plaza Theater. It opened up as an opulent movie palace in the 1930s, operating for 55 years before shutting down in 1985. It remained dark for about 2 decades before a grand renovation took place, turning it into a performing arts center in 2006. So it's an old building that got repurposed, right? And what comes with all these old buildings that have been repurposed? So this is what people have had to say. The dust and cobwebs may be gone, but it appears the ghosts have remained. Some of the plaza's creepy tales concocted in abundance feature all the usual suspects. a drifting woman in white, materializing man in black, a vanishing child bouncing a ball. I said that like that was all one thing, but it's a drifting woman in white, a materializing man in black, and a vanishing child bouncing a ball. Like most ghost stories, their veracy lies in the retelling rather than reoccurring, but a much larger share of the plot's supernatural phenomenon may require a ghost hunter skill set to resolve. Apparitions including orbs and shadows, physical manifestations like electrical components switching on and off without power, objects moving independently, and sounds without sources, and manifestations such as stimulations by touch, smell, and temperature have all endured, transgressing the barrier between spiritual and the material worlds again and again. Together they suggest something more dynamic than a mere ghost story. You might want to call this a real haunting. The only connection with this and the woman in white in La Llorona is the woman in white. That's about it. Seems like a bust, doesn't it? Yes. So that's another story. I'm keeping these right here. Okay, so let's add it to my media. So open the file, upload media, and it's gonna be downloads. This one did the limit of 100 megabytes. By how much? That's my fault because I was like, let's download this one with the highest quality. Keep editing. Hold on. We'll get it right. Export key, the lowest setting I can go, right? Hopefully this fixes it. And I'll add it as part 2. Because now I gotta fix that, right? So I'm gonna add it to it. Hopefully this is enough. It comes out great. We'll see. But yeah, so there's a lot of stories of the woman in white, La Llorona, the weeping woman in white, the woman in black. Some of the woman in black stories are also the same thing, but they're more maleficent. They're darker. La Llorona is already a scary story, right? It's telling. It's what we've been told since we were children. Stay away from, don't go out at night. Don't go near the river. Don't go where you're not supposed to go. And that was just used as a way to keep us in place. And like me and Shining Nathan tell you on the story, that's just how we grew up. It was a fear. We were controlled by fear. And I hate to say it like that, but like that's how parents kept us in line. This is almost done uploading. About 30 seconds left. But yeah. And that's just how parents kept us in line. So, and this was, I hate to say it, but this took the longest amount of time for me to research and pull up and find. Just because it is so much to it. I never thought that the story was going to be so much. Why? It's more than 100 megabytes. So I have another way of doing it. We'll put it on piece by piece. Because I really want y'all to see the story and I don't want to add it in post. I could add it in post. But I'm stubborn and I want to show it now while we're live, while we're doing this. So Shining Nathan, change the view so I can see part 1. Open. I guess I'm going to have to add it in post because I downloaded them at the highest quality I could so I could put them all together in a nice order. That's my own fault because I'm not going through and doing all that again. So I'm going to mark this point. Bam. And then this is where I'm going to clip it and put it in. And it should go right now.
And sometimes the reason why she's called the Lady in White versus La Llorona is because she was actually a woman of nobility and she was married to a man of nobility, a general in the Mexican army. And as they were expanding into Texas and turning it into settable land, the general, her husband, had found a plot of land and created a rancho along the river. And so this being 200-300 years ago, I forget the time frame exactly, they also created a town nearby the rancho. And most of the town people would work on the rancho or other things adjacent. And she was the most beautiful woman in that area. She was stunning. She was his prize. And he loved her dearly. Unfortunately, because of her beauty, one of the ranch hands became very covetous of her, wanting her, falling in love with her because she was very good-natured, very kind, very quote-unquote pure, which is where you get the Lady in White from. Because the They had just been married. They had not had children yet. And because they were focusing on doing the ranch. And after a few months of married, I think it was time frame, it's like a few months to a year. The husband gets called back to Spain because, of course, I think this is around the time that they were still very much tight bound to Spain, or if not still part of Spain. And, excuse me, he needed to make the journey. And she wanted to go back to Spain with him for this journey on a family matter. And she, of course, says, no, that I'm in love with my husband. I appreciate it, but no thanks. I'm married. Rubs him wrong because how dare the Catherine, the Dawn, have not only riches and wealth and acclaim, but also this beautiful woman too. That is not fair. So 8 months go by, and that ranch hand is growing more and more, has more and more envidia. And so the Dawn comes back from the extended trip because of family emergency, family business back in Spain. And she is clearly pregnant, close to giving birth. And he is overjoyed because the time frame does make sense. It has been roughly about 8 months since he's been gone. And so he is ecstatic. She knows it is his child. They throw a big old celebration. He drinks, everybody drinks. She is ecstatic. With that evening, while everybody is drinking, the Dawn gets drunk and the ranch hand gets drunk. And throughout this time has been fuming. Eventually, he takes the Dawn into a back corner of the rancho and confesses that she had an affair with him. The child that she is pregnant with is not his. And so the Dawn, who is now drunk, and this is a very loyal farmhand, why would he lie? He, in a rage, orders the farmhand to take her and hang her far from the rancho. And so the farmhand gets a butt-in, and they basically kidnap her and take her to this tree at the edge of close to the river, and tells her, you are being hanged for infidelity. And she, of course, pleads and begs that, no, it couldn't have been. I never did. And he just does a grin, and she realizes that she has never, ever been unfaithful to her husband, and she is pregnant with his child, and he hangs her then and there. And she weeps because she was still pure and did nothing wrong, because the entire time that she was being hung, she was pleading that she was innocent of those claims. And eventually the Dawn, a day later, comes to his senses, gets out of his drunken stupor and realizes what he's done, and rides the long way to that tree to find her hanging there, and eventually just lives the rest of his life in a drunken stupor for what he did. And the ranch hand eventually there's different iterations of what the ranch hand does, but eventually he also wastes away in a drunken stupor. And so to this day, you will see her on the highway weeping for the loss of her innocence, that she still was innocent, that she did no wrong. And that was the story I was told for La Llorona.
Big enough gap so I can add it to it there. Okay, well, this may be a short episode, but the amount of research involved was a lot more than I anticipated. I'm not going to do another one of these big bads for a while because there was so much information I had to go through. It took me, most scripts I knock out in a week. I do a bunch of research. From home to work. Whenever I get time at work, I'll, get a couple paragraphs in, half a page, whatever, right? Then at home, I do a little bit more research and I get more done. And by the end, it's a 5-page script. And on Google Share Drives, it's a 6-page script. On Word documents, it's 5. On here, it's 6. And this was 4.5 pages. So I fell short because there's so much information. I couldn't get enough in. It was way too much for me to add to it. And if I didn't stop now, I'd still be typing away and you'd never get the story. I'd be like up at 2 a.m. recording all this. So I had to cut it. Well, that's it for now. I will see y'all next time. And remember, stay spooky, everybody. And follow me on all my links. Click right here. Where is it at? I have a brand that comes up. Brand. Nope. People. Nope. Chat. Nope. There it is. Show it. Click the link below to follow me everywhere, and I'll see you next time. Stay spooky.